Thanks very much. It's a real privilege to be invited to participate in this event. One of the inspirations for this was an article written by Vivek Ranadive. And Vivek's the CEO of a financial data technology firm. And he's also a majority owner of the Sacramento Kings basketball team. And he writes about 5 forces that are shaping the globe today. He talks about an explosion of data. He talks about the rise of mobile computing. Probably all of us have a smartphone. He talks about new kinds of computing platforms. He talks about cloud and social, things like Twitter and Facebook. And he talks about globalization, and he talks about mathematics over science. And by that he means the ability to take all of that data that's being created by technology and analyze it and use it and make decisions out of it. And he goes on to say that anyone can build a business who's able to take advantage of that, to harness those forces, to create what he calls a 2-second advantage. And that 2-second advantage really boils down to the ability to make better decisions faster. I do a lot of traveling, and I see a lot of cities. And one of the things that I always do, it's to the point where it's subconscious, is I land, I look at the horizon, and I count cranes. And to me, cranes, when I see them, are a proxy for economic vitality. How robust is the community? And so I thought, when I got the invitation, I saw the topic, I thought I would try to combine a couple of things that are close to my heart. So economic growth and development, and the role of technology, and the role of mathematics to solve problems. So first I'd tell you a quick little story. Chemistry professor standing in front of a big freshman class, much like this. And in front of him, he's got some test tube filled with blue liquid, a test tube filled with red liquid, and a test tube filled with yellow liquid. And he looks at the class and he says, "You're going to see something really interesting happen when I put these things together." So he mixes the blue liquid and the red liquid, not so much. He adds the yellow liquid. All of a sudden, a huge explosion. The professor is knocked back, plaster's all over the wall, he's covered with dust. He dusts himself off and he says, "You've just seen the perfect demonstration of why, in choosing your careers, prophecy is a far safer line of work than implementation." And so I'm going to take a little bit of economics and a little bit of technology and a little bit of government. But I'm optimistic it's going to go all right. So there is a fierce competition among governments and among regions and among cities to draw businesses and draw investment to their communities. And ultimately, from a government's perspective, it comes down to 3 key questions. What makes a nation or a region, a city, a compelling place to live, work, and do business? You know, what makes a business want to relocate or stay or expand or grow in the area? And lastly, there's just a fixed amount of money that's available to any organization of any, whatever, government, anything. So what's the right balance of the initiatives to achieve citizen satisfaction, to invest in infrastructure, and to invest in the things that draw businesses and investment to a community? And the typical economic development plan consists of a couple of things. You know, there's a little bit about why the community is good and the infrastructure and you know, access to ports or a university. But it ultimately comes down to a couple of things. Tax incentives, you know, what kind of tax rebate can we give to a company? Or perhaps a long-term lease or a real estate deal. You know, what can we do to help somebody either stay and expand or attract them with, you know, access to some government land and a long-term lease? That works really well sometimes. Oftentimes it doesn't work. And I'll give you a perfect example. So Boeing recently went through a 2-year-long exercise. And what they were looking for was a place to build a new and redesigned 777X jumbo jet. 20 states were interested. Canada was interested, Japan, Mexico. Boeing went to all these presentations, and they all started to sound the same to Boeing. You know, they got the story about why the city or community was a good place. And it came down to, here's the tax incentive, or here's the long-term lease deal. And it got to the point where Boeing actually stood up. You know, this is a big company, and they they don't necessarily play nice all the time. Ooh, I shouldn't say that. But Boeing stood up and said, look, it is about more than taxes. It's about more than rebates. It's about the quality of the community. It's about access to talented and skilled resources. It's about the commitment to education. So a lot more than just those two things. And we're gonna talk a little bit about agile economies and fragile economies. So an agile economy is one that's able to sense and respond to opportunity. It's got a group of stakeholders that are really committed to, in a general sense of an understanding of where the community is now, where it wants to be, and the steps that it's going to take to get there. And an agile economy is one that's in balance between the kind of businesses that are there and the kind of skills and resources that they have access to. A fragile economy is something totally different. It's out of balance between the businesses and skills. Sometimes, businesses want to expand but don't have access to the right kind of skills. Sometimes the business is left and skilled resources that are there leave too. It's an economy that suffers from shocks easily. And I'll give you an example. So my dad was a professor. He taught at Holy Cross College in Massachusetts. And one of the great things about having a father who's a professor is that we got to spend a lot of time in summer vacations together. And one of our great trips, we did a couple of times actually, was to go with some long trips, driving trips out west. And as kids, one of the things that we always got excited about was when we passed a road sign or maybe got to stop to visit a ghost town. So ghost town is a western ghost town. It's an abandoned place. Typically, there was a gold or a silver mine there. The mine played out, the businesses left, the miners left, everything left. There's nothing but sort of a handful of shuttered buildings. So an extreme example, but a real example of what it means to have a fragile economy. So last kind of definition that we'll go through here. Economy. Two interesting definitions. One of them is a system, wherein goods and services are bought, and the other really is about about how resources are used. How resources are used. And so what makes an economy agile and what makes an economy fragile? So I'll talk about some of the trends going on in the world and what is going on with agile economies. The world's in transition and economies are changing. The difference between rich countries and poor countries that gap is really starting to blur. One of the things that's blurring it is access to technology. So developing countries and growing countries are able to import it, they're able to adapt it, and they're able to use it to create things and build things. Many of the things that used to be built in, developed and rich countries. Software code is written on every corner of the planet today. By now, it's, everybody here knows about the rise of Asia. So it's not going to be too long before the world's largest economy is China, followed by the US, followed by India. Not at all a knock on the US. We got everything that we need to have a healthy economy here. That's just what happens when you have 1 billion people whose economy suddenly gets cranked up. Capital flows. Another change that's occurred in the world is these developing and the growing nations are increasingly opening themselves to trade. They're increasingly becoming financially integrated with the rest of the world. The world is awash in cash and capital, and it's able to find opportunity no matter where it is on the planet. So a lot of change in terms of how economies are shifting and where things are shifting. Populations are in transition also, 43% to 22% to 0%. As recently as 1990, 43% of the world's population lived in extreme poverty, less than $1 a day. By 2008, that number had declined to 22%, and donor nations of the world, US, UN, World Bank, have a goal to get that number to 0% by 2030. Some other population changes that are pretty relevant, 7% to 16%. Now, the biggest population shift on the planet right now is an increase in the number of people over 65. In 1990, 7% of the world's population was 65 or older. By the year 2030, it's going to be 16%. Huge implications for the services and for infrastructure and the things that cities invest in. In pre-modern times, 2% of the world's population lived in towns or something resembling a city. 98% of the world's population lived in a rural agrarian life. We're in a rapidly urbanizing world right now. 50% of the world's population lives in cities, and by 2030, it's going to 70%. We talked about economies and what made for, we talked about economies earlier, and one of the definitions was sort of a thrifty and efficient use of resources. Cities are can be incredibly efficient places for people to live. There's better access to water, better access to sanitation, better access to culture and social things. The problem is that cities get to a point where things start to be really expensive and the costs increase. So an example of that environment, cities start to have big environmental and natural resource consequences for people that live there. And I'll give you an example from just up 95 in Washington, D.C. So in Washington, D.C., which is like a lot of cities in the East Coast and a lot of cities in the Midwest, there's combined water and there's a combined water treatment plant. And what that means is water that runs off the roads and during a thunderstorm runs into the wastewater treatment plant, just like the water that comes from our houses and our business goes to that wastewater treatment plant. The problem is when there's a giant tropical storm or a massive band of thunderstorms, millions of gallons of water all hit that wastewater treatment plant at the same time. And that water's got to go, all of that soup has to go somewhere. And it goes, in DC, it goes into the Anacostia River and the Potomac River. That problem is costing governments billions of dollars to solve. Technology gives governments the ability to better manage their environmental, their economic, and their social objectives. You know, we're all part of a city somewhere. And here's a quick picture of a city. You know, we might be citizens or we might be businesses, but a city will consist of research and healthcare and transportation, infrastructure. And each one of those things is sitting on piles of data, and that data is growing every day. And there's an increasing interconnectedness of all of those things. The cities that are better able to take advantage of that data to make better decisions, to make those decisions faster, are going to be the places where people want to live, businesses want to go. And I'll give you I'll take it down a level and give you some examples. So in New York City, has been a huge leader in using analytics to fight crime. And so what they do is they document and they keep track of everything, every crime that's committed, what the weather was like, where it was committed, when it was committed, to create heat maps of crime. And there may be a particular weather situation and a particular set of activities that are going on in the city on a particular evening. They can take that data and they can match it with past events, and they can change the way that they do their policing and the way that they do their patrols. I mean, nobody wants to live in a city that's heavy with crime. Businesses don't want to move to cities that are rife with crime. So analytics gives the ability, analytics is an example of how cities can do things with technology to make their areas more interesting and vibrant and livable. Transportation and congestion. So every city has major rush hour problems. Stockholm, Singapore, and London have all done something that's kind of different and kind of interesting. What they've done is they've put tolling inside the inner core of the cities. And what that does is, so if you drive in during rush hour, you pay a lot of money. If you drive during the middle of the day, it's a little bit less, and if you drive on the weekend, it's a little bit less. But it has made a huge difference. So in Stockholm, for example, there's 20% less traffic. There's 40% less pollution at peak times due to the fact that there aren't cars just sitting stacked in traffic jams. And tens of thousands of new people are riding mass transit. And it's being funded by the public transportation. So just a few examples. Economic agility is a dynamic activity. For every city, it's going to depend on the combination of hard infrastructure, ports, ridges, roads, and it's going to depend on soft infrastructure, the kind of universities that are there, access to healthcare, the kind of skills and talents that's there. So fragile or agile? You know, I talked about our trips out west when I was a kid. In every way, data is a new natural resource. And analytics gives us the ability to mine it, to use it, and get value out of it. You know, we're all somewhere on that stakeholder ring somewhere. We all live somewhere. We may work at a university, or we may be students at a university, or maybe in transportation. In the US, we have everything that we need. In fact, we probably have everything that we need right in this room to go identify a bunch of problems or find some opportunities and get things done. And so that's the real question. You know, what kind of economy are we helping to build? What kind of economy will you help to build? So that's it. Thanks very much.